Hi guys! So yesterday I watched Anastasia Ruby's, or Stephanie's, video she did about her favorite guilty pleasure names, and at the end she said that if we wanted to we could leave a video response talking about some of our favorite guilty pleasure names. So that's what I've decided to do. Since I already had a list of guilty pleasure names and all I had to do was print it off, and so I've decided to share it with you guys. For those of you who don't know what a guilty pleasure name is, it's a name that you like, but that you would never give a child of yours, or you would never want that to be your name because maybe where you live it's not a name that people could pronounce or spell, or it has a bad meaning, or it has a bad story associated with it, but you still like it, so it's a guilty pleasure name. And so I'm going to start off with some of my favorite guilty pleasure names for girls, and the first one I have is Marigold. And I know that flower and plant names are very trendy right now, and names like Violet and even Ivy and Lilac are being used for girls, but I just can't imagine having a little girl named Marigold and then having her be a tomboy. I would feel really bad if she turned out to be a tomboy because Marigold is such a girly name, such a frilly, flowery name. So that's why it's on my guilty pleasure list. The next name I have is McKinley, and it is not my style at all. It sounds trendy, it has that Mac sound in it, and it's so cutesy, but I still like it partly because it is so cutesy. The thing is, I can only imagine it on a little girl. I can't imagine it on somebody my age, or a middle-aged woman, or an older woman. I don't think anyone who wasn't a little girl could be taken seriously with the name McKinley, so that's why that's on my guilty pleasure list. The next name I have is a name that I used to absolutely hate, and that is Morag. And I started liking it because it is so different, and because it's Scottish, and it actually has a nice meaning. It means great. When my little cousin was born, my uncle wanted to name her Morag, but my aunt didn't like the name, so she ended up being called Tasia. The next name I have on my guilty pleasure list is the name of a Greek goddess, and that is Mnemosyne. And in Greek mythology, Mnemosyne was the goddess of memory, and she was also the mother of the 9 muses. And the muses were the goddesses of the arts. And I also have one of the names of the muses on this list, and that is Terpsichore. And I think Terpsichore is one of the funnest names to say, and she was the muse of dance. The thing about those two names is that where I live, nobody would be able to pronounce them, nobody would be able to spell them, so I don't think they're very usable. Maybe if I was Greek they would be more usable, but I don't know, maybe even then they still wouldn't be usable. The next name I have for girls is Nimue. And Nimue I think has the most beautiful sound, but again it's one that people would have trouble spelling and pronouncing. And Nimue is a name from Arthurian legend. She was the Lady of the Lake. And the last one I have for girls is one that I heard just recently used for a little girl, and that is Sinclair. And I think it's really cool, and I actually have this last name in my family tree. So I think it could be used as a middle name, but I would never use it as a first name for a girl because I think she'd have to go around her whole life being like, no, my name's Sinclair, not Claire, so I wouldn't want to do that to a little girl. And then I have a couple of unisex names that I like, and the first one is Hero. And in Greek mythology, Hero was actually a girl. And she is kind of a tragic character in Greek mythology. She was the lover of Leander, and every night Leander would swim across the river to be with her, and then one night he drowned, so she jumped from her balcony or tower or whatever and killed herself. So it's a very Romeo and Juliet like type story, and I don't really think that I would want to name a little girl after her, even though I think the name is cool. And for a boy, I just think it is kind of a pretentious name, but I still kind of like it. So it's on my guilty pleasure list. And the other unisex name that I have is Rafferty. And Rafferty is one that I could almost see not being a guilty pleasure name, but it's just really not my style. And I can't decide if I like it better for a boy or a girl. It's an Irish name and it means abundance. And then the first name I have for boys I think would be a lot more usable if it wasn't for the Harry Potter books and movies, and that is Draco. And Draco Malfoy is Harry Potter's nemesis in the Harry Potter series, so I think that makes it pretty unusable. But it's an Italian name that means dragon. The next boy's name I have is Phoebus. And Phoebus is another name for the Greek god Apollo, and Phoebus was also the name of a character in Victor Hugo's novel The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which has been made into a Disney movie. The reason that this is on my guilty pleasure list is because I think a lot of people would associate it with the female name Phoebe, and that's what they would think that his name was, and I just know a lot of people don't really like this name. The next one I have is Riker, and Riker is on my guilty pleasure list because it's not my style at all. I could definitely see it being a cool name on somebody else's little boy, but I can't see myself having a kid named Riker. The next name I might consider using as a middle name, and that is Shale. And shale is just a type of rock, and I just think it has a really cool sound. But it would take somebody very brave to use this as a first name. But it could be an interesting middle name choice. The next name I have, I think, would be a lot more usable as well if it wasn't for Harry Potter. I don't think it would be that usable, but I think it's really cool, and that is Salazar. And Salazar is originally a Basque last name that means old hall, but in the Harry Potter series, Salazar Slytherin is one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and he's kind of considered a bad guy, so I wouldn't use that name. And the last name I have on my guilty pleasure list is Horace. And I think Horace is cool, even though it does kind of sound like an old man name. But the first syllable, I think, could create a lot of teasing potential. And Horus is a Latin name that means man of time, and I believe it was also the name of an Egyptian god. So that one might be usable as a middle name, but I think I'm going to keep it on my guilty pleasure list for now. So those are some of my guilty pleasure names, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Bye. And so that's what I've decided to do, because I think guilty pleasure names are really, really fun, and my doorbell is ringing. Guilty pleasure name, So I have, and at the end she said that if we wanted to leave a video response talking about our favorite baby names, then we could do that. Guilty pleasure names.